take a more extended look at total surplus and what happens at different production quantities. All right, so let's just start off by looking at this market and analyzing where we're at. We have supply and demand and an equilibrium price quantity. So here's our equilibrium quantity. This is the equilibrium price. We know that this triangle, I'm just going to mark it from here to the equilibrium over by the price. This is our consumer surplus. That this lower triangle is our producer surplus, and that this larger triangle, let's mark it with red, right? This triangle is going to be total surplus. All right, so that is our total surplus. Now, if we have talked about how it makes sense, it is rational to produce units where as long as the value to the buyer exceeds the cost to the seller. So a market will produce all of these units and maximize total surplus like we've talked about. Let's take a look at what would happen if we produced a quantity that was less than the market quantity. So in this case, we produce at, call this Q1. So in this market, Q1 quantity is produced. What's total surplus under this situation? Well, all of these units have been produced and the value exceeds the cost. So this would be total surplus currently. And assuming at this point we'd have to have some kind of change in price, producer and consumer surplus would not be as evenly divided as it appears right here. So I'm just going to drop that out. Something true. Okay, so this is what total surplus looks like if we're producing at Q1. All the units that we've produced have been rational, they've been logical, but the problem is that we've left some other units on the table that we place a higher value on than would cost to produce. So we should have made these items here as well. So this is the surplus that we actually got, but then right here we have some surplus that we could have gotten, but we did not. And that area, that little triangle, we call the dead weight loss. It is the surplus not realized by a society when it produces outside of the market price and quantity. So the issue here is not so much the units produced up to this point, right? Because it would have made sense to produce them. Society placed a higher value on them than their price. Okay, what about the opposite situation? So in this case, we're going to still start with our market quantity. I'm just going to leave the price off because of what we're going to be doing with this graph. And let's say in this case we did produce all of these units, and then we kept going beyond the market quantity, and we say produced what we have marked here as Q1 in this case. Well, let's take a look at the impact on surplus. All of these units added to total surplus. And here's total surplus maximized in this case, producing at the market price and quantity. But for all of those units beyond, for all of the units between QE and Q1, so these additional units here, the cost was greater than the value, meaning that we paid more for things than they were worth. And that has the effect of reducing total surplus. So that same deadweight loss concept is present here if we just end up giving up some of our surplus. So in that case, our total surplus would be equal to whatever this triangle's value was minus the value of the deadweight loss triangle over here. In fact, it's always going to be what total surplus is outside of the market quantity, what total surplus would have been minus that deadweight loss. So the point of this is to show you that anytime we produce outside of the market quantity and price, we incur deadweight losses. In other words, society as a whole does not benefit as much as it otherwise would have. Now, that's not to say that we should never produce outside the market price and quantity. We're going to look at some situations later on where we want to correct markets where there's been some failures. That's a little bit different, but also we look at situations where we need to tax markets. There are sometimes monopoly present. So a lot of those things will cause markets to leave equilibrium and therefore be less socially efficient than they otherwise would have been. but it still becomes a normative decision for society as to whether or not that's a sensible option, whether or not it makes sense to do that. We're going to look at some more applied examples as we go further into the concept of deadweight loss and theory of the firm. But suffice it to say for now, when we produce outside the market quantity, there is a deadweight loss that society incurs in some way.